Where do you work, and what is your main area of interest?
I work at New Mexico State University, and my major area of interest is critical multicultural teacher education.
Okay. How do you define a border? What is it for physically, mentally, economically?
And I thought that the best way to be able to respond to that question is give you my start of how I began looking at the border. It was created by one book, and the book was written by Gloria Anzaldúa. And it's Borderlands, La Frontera, the New Mestiza. And what she does for me is she places the border in a place that is reachable by any of us from anywhere that we can come. And I think that the border is it's not the new frontier. It is the frontier if we decide to actually become more humane about our teaching and learning, more humane about how we look at ourselves, more humane about how we look at the other. The border is a complexity filled with ambiguity. So the whole notion of border pedagogy, border philosophy, border theory, to me, and I borrow heavily, and Gloria Anzaldúa has taken me to the next level of me wanting to think about the border, is that it is living without borders. It is realizing that we have deep and serious contradictions as human beings, that we are racist, that we are sexist, that we are homophobic and heterosexist, that we are classist, that we have all these things that make us less human. But being on the border means for us to say, I will not want to resolve these contradictions that I have within me because of the way I've been socialized, but I am going to transform these contradictions into something else. That's the border, where one has the courage or makes the courage or decides upon that route to become more human, more humane. So to me, that's the border.
From that definition, how do we, as teachers, how does that influence our goals?
I think we have to become aware that we are complex beings, that we are full of ambiguity, that we are full of contradictions, and not think for 1 second that we have the way of thinking about how learning can occur with students. The complexity that students bring into our backgrounds, we have to know their stories. And those stories are complex and they take forever to understand. And we cannot assume for 1 second that we do know them. But remember, because of media, as the media that we are now involved in, you and I, via this interaction, creates a shallowness that doesn't let us touch the human bond that we have with each human being. So that means, that border means then letting go of our prejudices, letting go of how we may stereotype and saying, I am going to learn from you, and you are my teacher. So that's how it looks philosophically. How it looks in the everyday means asking questions, means probing, means looking for another way to scaffold, to bring in your learning theory and to scaffold with a student who you are not reaching and she's not reaching you, who you are willing to say, okay, how can I work with you? Help me to help you. What is it that you're not understanding? And then what is it in me that's creating me this opportunity not to understand? And then to want to engage and to truly struggle for that engagement. So that's what it looks like to me in the everyday.
Interacting there. How do we sort of get teachers to practically do what you're asking them to do, which is engage with them?
We have to keep in mind that we have to become meaningful ourselves, to love ourselves, to care for ourselves in ways that helps us to understand that when we do that from within, we also do it to without. So we cannot be blind, for example, to border crossings, such as when you're going from here to Albuquerque, or from here to Deming, or from here to Carlsbad, or from here to Alamogordo, and be stopped by La Migra. and know the difference of when I go through that checkpoint and you, David, go through that checkpoint. There is a quantifiable and qualitative difference. Teachers cannot be invisible to that. Teachers cannot be invisible to how girls are portrayed on TV. Teachers cannot be invisible, cannot let the realities blind them. Simple things like understanding that you actually, when you start saying she is smart and she is not so smart, you're creating what we're indoctrinated into believing, which is tracking. So then we must then become agents, willing to look at all those invisibilities around us and how we've been indoctrinated into think that there are those divisions. Because the border, remember, is not a division. It's a new place.
How have schools or areas that don't live on a border benefited from these kinds of ideas you're talking about?
Well, for me, the border is not living in the Southwest only. It is not living in Antone, where part of you is in Texas and part of you is in Nuevo Mexico. The border is also in Michigan. The border is also in Vancouver. The border is also in downtown Salt Lake City. The border is everywhere. The border is a metaphor for one deciding to become conscious about the great humanity that we have. We are not taking all that makes us human into consideration, and that we do have the capacities, but that will require us as border people, and I mean border people in a very big way, in a very humane way, where the border is everywhere. It will require us for us to become more disciplined about what we can do, about realizing that the borders that have been placed between us, the fences that have been placed between us, have been actually constructed by us. But then we make them real. So then we must deconstruct them because they're not real. The notion of borders, the phenomenon of borders, David, is not only a thesis, but it's also an antithesis. And both the thesis and the antithesis creates a synthesis. And that new synthesis becomes another thesis, which then creates an antithesis. It's us reliving, us deciding to actually go into the moment of wanting to become more human as teachers and more human as learners. The teacher-learner notion that I use a lot.
Listen, but what's the most relevant thing for people to understand about where the antithesis and the thesis meet?
Gloria Anzaldúa names that Napantla. And let me just quickly read to you what she says. It's on page 78. She says, the ambivalence from the clash of voices results in mental and emotional states of perplexity. Internal strife results in insecurity and indecisiveness. The mestiza's dual or multiple personality is plagued by psychic restlessness. In a constant state of mental napantlism, an Aztec word meaning torn between ways, la mestiza is a product of the transfer of the cultural and spiritual values of one group to another. But it's more than that. It is this, obviously, but she has helped me to understand that this napantla, this place torn between one and another, really isn't that ambiguous. It's my being courageous enough to want to see that that's a place which actually has a beginning that will create in me as well as the students that I interact with, to go to that next level of thinking, that next level of becoming more human, that next level of passion, that next level of love, that next level of caring for themselves and caring for their charges, who are the students that they're going to be interacting with for years to come. Each of us must reinvent the notion of border. And I'm hoping that with this conversation that we had today, you and I and the audience that will hear us will reinvent the importance and the significance of border. Thanks.
Thank you.